Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into the Cam Rogers Show on this Wednesday, November 8th, 2017. I am your host, Cam Rogers. We're taking you up until 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Hope everybody's doing well out there. It's a little gloomy here in Dallas, but it is beautiful here inside the studio. We thank you for tuning into this completely live program. We want you throwing your comments, your reactions, your thoughts about all the topics that I will discuss here on the show today. It's a fun one, ladies and gentlemen. Gonna start off with a little talk about the Indianapolis Colts in my opening rant and how they have just been a train wreck with Andrew Luck. I'm sure Harris Rubenstein is looking forward to hearing that conversation. At the 15-minute mark, we have Charlotte Hornets host Taylor Cunningham. And Taylor and I go back a couple of years. She was the ACC Digital Network guest reporter back in the day, and I remember following her campaign. Really talented reporter. Looking forward to chatting with her. And then later in the show, a little CFP Rankings analysis, and then some inside information, if you will, kind of a breakdown of what is to come in the Ezekiel Elliott decision tomorrow. As we stand right now, it looks like Zeke is good to go against Atlanta, but all of that is for naught because there's going to be some sort of decision tomorrow, and we'll know more information about that. I'll lay it all out for you guys. You'll know what to expect, and perhaps all those Zeke Elliott fantasy owners out there can prepare accordingly. And then a final word about one of the great pitchers in baseball history, Roy Halladay, just tragically passing yesterday in a plane crash, and we'll say our thoughts as we exit the show here today. It is episode 26 of the Cam Rogers Show, and we want you, of course, subscribing to the podcast version, too, to get me wherever you go. Head on to iTunes, search the Cam Rogers Show, hit that subscribe button, maybe leave a review as well, and we appreciate that ahead of time. So, with that, let's get into the opening rant here, talking about the Indianapolis Colts and the latest chapter in what it has been a saga that is a train wreck. Really surrounds this whole Tony Dungy thing and what happened when he was on the Dan Patrick Show just on Monday. So, Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy, you've seen him before, Sunday Night Football pregame, all that good stuff, with his buddy Dan Patrick, did a live simulcast, of course, with Dan Patrick. That's what they do. Of course, you have the radio version and the TV version, and it's streamed everywhere and what have you. And sometimes during the show, they do a live look-in. And during one of the live look-ins, where Tony is just kind of sitting back talking with Dan Patrick, essentially said that Irsay told him Andrew Luck's injury is in his own head. Whoa. Wow. Okay, so first of all, I will say that Tony Dungy did talk with Pro Football Talk and said that Irsay didn't make the comments to him privately. Quote, "I never had a conversation with Jim Irsay. I never said I had a conversation with Jim Irsay." So if you didn't have a conversation with him, how exactly did you hear this? He didn't say it in public to a press conference, so perhaps it was to a group of people. That's what the theory is, that Tony Dungy was within a group where Jim Irsay were saying these comments. But just the fact that this is now out in the open about the whole Andrew Luck saga, he's placed on IR. We won't be seeing him the rest of the season, and it has been an absolute waste of talent. It has been a failure by the Indianapolis Colts organization that this talented quarterback, perhaps one of the more polished quarterbacks coming out of the draft in recent memory, has now missed and will continue to miss games here in 2017, missed a slew of games in 2015, has had no help on the offensive line, which I will get to later. The wide receiver position has been a failure as well. Dante Moncrief has disappointed. Philip Dorsett was an absolute bust. He's no longer on the team now. And this statement by Irsay, if true, is pretty darn insane. The Indianapolis Colts have been a bottom feeder team this year, of course. They're 3-6. They played well against a Tom Savage-led Texans team most recently. But in the grand scheme of things, this has been a lost season. And the recent statements here, apparently by Jim Irsay, just show the dysfunction within the management all the way down to the player level. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a shame. The Indianapolis Colts have been blessed with fantastic seasons thanks to Peyton Manning. And then after the 2011 season, Colts fans were blessed with that number 1 overall pick where they could go out and get an Andrew Luck. And what's wrong with management by the Colts is the fact that they got complacent. They thought, all right, we did pretty well ourselves with no run game and Peyton Manning slinging the ball around and, a below-average secondary, a pretty good pass rush, but that's it. So we could do that again with Andrew Luck, right? So they went out, they drafted Andrew Luck. They didn't give the guy any help on the offensive line. No help on the defense, really. The secondary has been a major disappointment this year. And so the reports going into this season about Luck were, okay, so he had the surgery in January to repair the shoulder, and that was a torn labrum in his right shoulder to be exact. Practiced multiple times last month before being shut down and actually given a cortisone shot. So when the soreness in his shoulder didn't subside, Luck was placed on injured reserve by the Colts just last week. And so this is obviously not a new thing in terms of health problems with Andrew Luck. Originally injured his shoulder back in 2015 in Week 3 against Tennessee. He missed 2 games because of that, then 7 more games because of a lacerated kidney. That just does not sound pleasant at all. So there's a resume there with Andrew Luck getting hurt. And I don't think it has to do with his own personal durability issues. I think it has to do with the way in which the Colts have drafted in recent years and the way in which this organization has been run. It's complacency. It's been a problem. It's going to continue to be a problem, and they're wasting away one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL. So we want you commenting, ladies and gentlemen. I want your thoughts on this. A lot of people have written articles out there that the Colts have indeed wasted away Andrew Luck here. So we want to hear from you. Throw in the comment section. We'll be throwing them up here on the broadcast as we see fit. Did the Colts waste away Andrew Luck's talent? Because there's no doubt about it. He was the consensus number 1 coming out of the draft, right? And the Colts got him with great confidence. And so this new chapter in this saga, where Jim Irsay is apparently saying these comments that all of a sudden Andrew Luck's injuries are now in his head, I think is absolutely unreal. What does that even mean, Jim? How about you draft a little better? How about you improve the offensive line? How about you give Andrew Luck a run game to actually complement his talents? So the last time we saw Andrew Luck was back in 2016. That's when the Colts went 8-8, finished 3rd in the AFC South. And here are the rankings. In terms of passing yards, they were 5th. Touchdown passes, they were 6th. How about the rushing offense? In yards, 23rd. Andrew Luck had no help in the run game. And look, Frank Gore has had so many good years, but obviously those good years are now behind him. Maybe they have something in Marlon Mack, maybe not, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, when Andrew Luck was there at quarterback, did not have much of a run game. They tried with Trent Richardson. Remember that project? That never worked out. Vic Ballard, remember him? So, I mean, all of these names I could throw out here at the running back position, and I already threw out a couple of names there at the wide receiver position in Dorsett and Moncrief. T.Y. Hilton has been good, but it can't just be him. Dwayne Allen is no longer there. Kobe Fleener is no longer there. A couple of players they drafted just recently, not too long ago. And so there's turnover going on in the offense. There is nothing to really look at in the defensive secondary and say, okay, that Colts team is good. You look at the Pro Football Focus grades at this point for the Indianapolis Colts. Moncrief, 46.3. That's a poor grade. Kamar Aiken, the former Baltimore Raven, 41.5, a poor grade. The 3 interior offensive linemen, all below 40, according to Pro Football Focus. That includes Ryan Kelly, who was highly touted coming out of Alabama at the center position. The only adequate offensive lineman right now for the Colts is Anthony Costanzo, graded out as 80.4 at left tackle. That's it. And when the interior is so bad, left guard, center, and right guard, why even bring Andrew Luck back to this team? He's going to get hurt. Interior defensive lines are going to lick their chops on this offensive line. And Pittsburgh is up next. I fear for Jacoby Brissett. When you have Hayward and Bud Dupree coming at you, it's like, look out. And so I don't know how truthful this whole Jim Irsay comment is. Nobody really knows. And Tony Dungy seemed to walk back this whole situation. But I feel like there has to be some sort of truth here. I mean, think about it. This has been a long saga. This has been a story that has gone on for years with Andrew Luck. And even when the Colts did make the playoffs, it almost seemed like it was still all luck. I remember his rookie year when he played against the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, the Colts didn't stand a chance because it was all Andrew Luck. I mean, there was no run game in that game. The secondary wasn't good at all. There was no pass rush on Joe Flacco. That was his Super Bowl year. And that, I feel, that game right there is kind of a microcosm of the mistakes the Colts have made. They've tried, folks. They have tried. They went to the draft and have looked at the offensive line players, and it just really didn't pan out. How about these splits, though? So from the 2012 to 2014 season, here's the win-loss record. 33-15, 3 playoff appearances, a point differential of 114. Andrew Luck missed 0 games in those years. And a lot of those games were thanks to Andrew Luck, with comeback victories in the fourth quarter. How about 2015 to 2017, when the offensive line continued to be degraded and the secondary continued to have its issues? 18-22 win-loss record, 0 playoff appearances. Of course, the Colts can make the playoffs this year. They're 3-6, though, so they're not gonna. A point differential of minus 160, and 18 total games Andrew Luck has missed. Wow. And so it all just speaks right there. Some of the names here, you look back at the draft that the Colts have really targeted. Of course, you have Trent Richardson, who came over in the trade. Obviously, he wasn't drafted by the Colts, but Ryan Kelly has not panned out at the center position for the Indianapolis Colts. This organization is used to success. Used to it, right? With Peyton Manning at quarterback and making to all those playoffs and getting that Super Bowl victory, of course, against the Chicago Bears way back in 2005. And I guess, putting my mind in the front office right now, the management said, all right, let's get Andrew Luck. He's our next Peyton Manning. Let's lay back and not address our needs, and let's reach for fancy toys on the offensive side that we can throw to and put up a lot of points and go to the playoffs, win a Super Bowl that way. That's not what happens. That's how it works in the NFL. Defense still reigns supreme. You still need a pass rush. I think the New York Football Giants made that statement a couple of times in their Super Bowl victories. The Baltimore Ravens did it with theirs. The Denver Broncos did it with their victory as well. Defense is very much a part of a Super Bowl winning team. We have comments flowing in, so we want you, of course, continuing that, and we'll show them up here throughout the broadcast. One of our own, Harris Rubenstein, is very passionate about this topic. Biggest waste of talent we've seen in decades. Easily one of the best 5 QBs in football when healthy. Absolutely agree. I mean, intelligence all the way down. Talk about physical attributes. You talk about IQ, the intangibles, the leadership in the locker room. You can't compare. You can't compare. And so when you see Andrew Luck dealing with this issue, it makes you wonder, is it going to be a prolonged deal? Is this shoulder injury going to continue for the seasons on, right? Just imagine one tough hit at his shoulder next season. Is he done again? And so I think new GM Chris Ballard has a big-time project ahead of him. Of course, this is the new GM going into the 2017 season, and he needs to turn around a franchise that is currently in a downward spiral. Let's take a look at Austin's comment here. It won't continue. Chris Ballard will handle it. He didn't want him to play this season. There you go, Austin. Look, Chris Ballard obviously is not Ryan Grigson, so there's that. So we'll see what Ballard can do here, but he's got a big-time project that he needs to address. So we'll see what happens going forward. How about Lamont? New GM of Colts inherited a bad team. So you feel bad for Chris Ballard, Lamont. I hear you. I hear you. Look, Chris Ballard probably knew what he was getting into on his way into being the GM for the Colts, but he probably didn't realize that this whole Andrew Luck situation was going to continue as long as it has. And so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the opening rant here. The Indianapolis Colts have been a major disappointment this season for their play because of the way in which they've managed Andrew Luck. And Chris Ballard, he's got a lot of work ahead of him. So we'll see what happens with those Colts. All right, this is the Cam Rogers Show, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hit a quick break. Coming up on the other side, we have Charlotte Hornets host Taylor Cunningham on the line. Stick around. It's the Cam Rogers Show. Hey folks, welcome back to the Cam Rogers Show here on Chat Sports Facebook Live. Look who it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's Taylor Cunningham on the program. Taylor, of course, a host for the Charlotte Hornets. By the way, the first ever ACC Digital Network guest reporter. She's on the line right now. Taylor, appreciate the time. What's going on?
Thank you so much, Cam, for having me. That's right. A great reunion between us guest reporters. It's exciting to be on your show. Doing big things.
You gotta love it, right? And we're gonna have a fun conversation here. And let's start off with the Charlotte Hornets here. You've been the host for them for some time now. You're on the Jumbotron, which is pretty sick. I saw a picture of that recently, all that good stuff. So I want to ask you just in general, how fun has that been for you?
Oh, it's been an awesome experience. Working in the NBA in general has been so much fun. It's so much energy. And with the Charlotte Hornets, especially on the rise with this team that we've put together this year, it's been an incredible experience. I've got a lot of great things. Like you said, I'm hosting the pregame show, which is on Hornets.com before every home game. But I also get to do some hits that show up in arena on the video board. And so I can't complain. I'm loving my job with the Hornets. And looking forward to an exciting season that we've already got going a little bit here.
It was certainly in a crazy game last night against the Knicks there for the Charlotte Hornets, coming out on the losing end, however. They're in the middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference at this point. Taylor, what are you expecting out of this team overall in the 2017-2018 campaign here, especially with Dwight Howard coming on over?
Well, we had a really hot start, and we took down the top team in the East. Then we turned around, took down the top team in the West on back-to-back nights. Then we took down the Bucks with, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's playing an MVP caliber season. And so we were trending in the right direction, and then we hit this 4-game road trip. We finished with the Celtics on Friday, and so far, we haven't been able to get a win on the road, and I think it's been due a little bit to the injuries that we've faced so far this season. We have Nick Batum out with the elbow injury, and MKG has been in and out of the lineup a little bit, and that's really where the team's been struggling is defensively, and Coach talked about that after the loss last night against the Knicks, and I think once we get those guys back, it'll be a really strong team. One thing they worked on this offseason was getting depth on the roster. So we got the 2 rookies, Malik Monk, who is lights out shooting and has shown that in the last couple of games. Then we have Dwayne Bacon, who's just developing really, really well as a young player. But like you said, Dwight Howard on our team has been extraordinary. His defense, his physicality, his energy that he brings to the court, really helping the young players and helping the team in general. It's been fun to watch. So I think right now we've got off to a strong start, a little bit of a slow bump on the road, but it's really early in the season, so you can't really predict right now what's going to happen. But I, working for the team, think that it's going to be a pretty solid season for the Hornets. Once they get healthy, once they continue to develop that chemistry, it's going to be a really good season for the Hornets.
And, of course, Kemba Walker, Taylor, the undoubtedly best player on that team at this point. But I think if they really want to make a postseason run, right, they need some guys to step up this year. Who could be some dark horse players in that starting 5 or maybe off the bench that could really make an impact for this squad here?
Well, I think you've seen Jeremy Lamb so far this season. Last year he was a little bit of a struggling season for him, but this year he's gotten in the starting lineup with Nick Batum being out, and he is loving that 3 ball. He has put up some impressive performances so far this season, and I think we're really going to lend a hand on him when we make that playoff push later on in the season. He's been showing what he can do, and we all knew he was capable of it, but this season he's found that consistency, he's found that confidence, and I think Frank Kaminsky has been the same. He's really playing with a lot of confidence. Coming off the bench, he adds to that second unit. Cody Zeller as well. When he's in there coming off of what Dwight Howard can do, when you put Cody Zeller in there, you don't see a fall off, really. He's learning from Howard. He's learning how to be more physical under the rim. And he put in a lot of work. All of these players put in a lot of work in the offseason to really down the road when the season it's a long, long season. So when we get to that final push, I think we're going to really look to Jeremy Lamb, like I said, Frank Kaminsky, Cody Zeller to be those players that help Kemba Walker along with the rookies. But they've got to continue developing. And I think we have a good coaching staff that is going to get this team ready to be a big-time threat in the Eastern Conference.
I do want to revisit the Dwight Howard trade, Taylor, because it seems like NBA free agency is one of the craziest times in sports. And as a host for the Hornets, when you saw that news break, like, oh my God, Dwight Howard is coming to Charlotte, What went through your mind there?
Well, I think in general, this NBA offseason was one of the craziest in the books. It was trade after trade, big-time players leaving to go to another team. But when I saw Dwight Howard coming to the Hornets, I was thoroughly excited. I think that was one thing that we really missed last year. Coach Clifford is a defensive-minded team. Dwight Howard, his defense is so impactful on a team like what Coach Clifford is looking for. So I was extremely excited, as well as everyone across the Hornets organization. And I think that speaks to what kind of organization this is. Our GM is just incredible at going out and getting those kind of players that can really add to the team. So Dwight Howard, we've seen it already, a great addition to this team, and I think only more to come.
Shifting to the NBA in general here, Taylor, the big storyline right now so far this season, of course, the Cavaliers struggling. Is the sky falling in Cleveland? Is the media overreacting? Of course we may be. That's what we do. We love it. But I want to ask you, dare I say it, do the Cavs miss Kyrie right now?
Well, I don't really think it's that. I think it's still early in the season for all of these teams trying to find their chemistry. And the Cavs are playing without their point guard, Isaiah Thomas, that they traded for. So I think once you get Thomas back in the lineup, he adds to that offense that they're looking for. I think that will make a tremendous impact. But in general, I think they're dealing with a lot of injuries. They've had a lot of players come and go. And I think once they get on the same page, they're going to be the Cavs team that everyone knows them to be. LeBron James knows how to get his team on page. He's the best, one of the best in the league, one of the best leaders as far as getting everyone to gel. And I think once they get that chemistry, like I said, they're going to be a threat in the Eastern Conference, as they always are.
And, of course, you work for the Carolina Panthers as well, so I want to transition to a little Panthers talk here. Recently, a big-time victory for them against the Atlanta Falcons. Taylor, how far can this Panthers team go? Because they're sitting pretty right now in the NFC.
That's right. We're coming off two big divisional wins. We took down the Bucks in Tampa Bay, then just recently this past Sunday, the Atlanta Falcons, and it's been exciting. I think the Panthers are trending in the right direction. I think a lot of fans are coming to know what this team is capable of. A lot of good things. We saw the running game open up a little bit more this past week with Cam and Christian McCaffrey, but it's really with them too, just getting everyone to get that confidence, keep building on that confidence and opening up the offense. I mean, our defense, you cannot say anything more about our defense. We're number one in the league right now, and it's just I would be scared to go up against them. So that's not a problem, but I think getting our offense going a little bit more is going to be the thing that is really the focus the next couple of weeks, as we have some more tough opponents this week, the primetime game Monday night against the Dolphins. But I think all the players are playing extremely well, and they're only trending in the right direction, like I said.
Cam Newton versus Smoking Jay Cutler on Monday Night Football. You got to love it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We want to stay in the NFC South. The Saints have been a big-time surprise so far this year, Taylor. I mean, the defense is getting it done. Cam Jordan, that front line. Then you have Mark Ingram, they're running the football effectively with Kamara as well. Do the Saints scare you at all?
No one scares me when I'm working for the Carolina Panthers, and I know what our team is. Yeah, we fell short to the Saints one time this season, and we do have a tough matchup coming up against them after our bye week, and we go down to New Orleans to play them. So, yes, it's a tough game for the Panthers, but with our team going in the right direction, with our team building that confidence, building that strength on both sides of the ball, I think people should watch out for the Panthers. I mean, we're battling for that number one in the NFC South, so watch out, Carolina Panthers.
So you are, of course, an NC State graduate, Taylor, cheerleader back in the day, TBT. Have you been following the Wolfpack? Do you need some consoling right now on the Cam Rogers Show after that tough loss to Clemson? How you feeling?
I was hoping you would ask about that. Yes, I graduated from State. I cheered there, loved my time there, obviously still follow the Wolfpack. And I've been excited with the way their season has gone this season. But, yeah, 2 tough losses these past 2 weeks. But, I mean, they're going up against some tough competition, and they were in that Clemson game till the very end. And for some reason, Clemson and NC State every single year play each other so well. And so, I mean, you just never know what the outcome is going to be. We kind of gave it up there at the end. But I think this team, we're still ranked. You know, it's been an exciting season, and their defense like the Panthers, just playing extremely well. So I think Coach Dave Doran has got this team going in the right direction, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what he's built together, and I hope they can put together. They've got a little bit of an easier rest of the schedule, taking on Boston College and a few more teams this rest of the season that I hope they get those wins, maybe make a little bit more of a push, but I think Clemson's probably claimed the title in the Atlantic.
Taylor, I'm all about nostalgia on the Cam Rogers Show, so I always try to bring up the college days with my interviewees, so I had to do it. So glad you were expecting that. So you've actually also had the awesome experience of just interviewing so many people throughout your career so far, and I want to ask you, what has been the most memorable interview for you at this point?
You're right, and that's a tough question. Working at NC State with the athletes was by far really fun to get my career going. And one of my most memorable was going to the NCAA tournament with our basketball team. And we took down Villanova, the #1 seed. Then we got a big win on the buzzer. Talking to those college athletes, just getting those emotional answers for them was really a highlight of my career. But then moving on, I did an intern interview in that organization, and Wilson was one of my favorites to talk to. Down to earth, great guy. I mean, we have a little bit of an NC State tie. That might have made the interview a little bit easier. But then overall, honestly, I had the chance to interview with the Hornets and the Panthers as well, getting to know those guys' stories. That's really why I work in sports, is just wanting to learn more about them off the field and their storylines that they can bring and show people what they're like as human beings. Sometimes people watch them on TV and forget about that, and I think that's really important. So all of the athletes I've had a chance to work with, extremely great guys.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Taylor Cunningham on the Cam Rogers Show. Check her out, Hornets.com. One of the best in the business. Taylor, thanks so much for coming on the program. Hey, next time you're in Dallas, hit me up. We'll get you in studio. We'll co-host a show together. How about that?
Thank you so much, Cam. It was so fun up with you, and I wish you the best of luck.
All right, many thanks to Taylor for coming on the program here. We're going to hit a quick break on the Cam Rogers Show. Coming up on the other side, I will be analyzing the latest batch of college football playoff rankings. Stick around. It's the Cam Rogers Show. Hey, welcome back to the Cam Rogers Show. Once again, many thanks to Taylor Cunningham for coming on the program. One of the best in the business. Keep out for her, ladies and gentlemen. She is quite a talent. All right, let's get into a little college football playoff rankings. Fresh batch came out last night right here, 7 o'clock Eastern time on Chat Sports. We'll do it again a week or 6 days from now. Math is hard. So let's go and review what we have at this point. So I'll count you down, 25 all the way to 1. We've got 25 through 21. So we got Northwestern creeping in after their overtime victory against Riley's Nebraska Cornhuskers, if you will. Riley no longer probably going to be on that team, but we shall see. There's LSU there at number 24. NC State, the Wolfpack, Taylor's alma mater at 6-3 after that loss to Clemson. Memphis at number 22, Riley Ferguson and Norvell there, the head coach, having a great year for the Tigers. And Iowa State, perhaps a bit of a letdown last week. They're now 6-3, and they're at number 21. How about the rest of these names here? We've got 20 through 16, Iowa, after what was a convincing victory against Ohio State, Big time win for them. They're now at number 20. Washington State, 8-2 on the year. They're 19. How about UCF? No freaking respect for the Knights and Scott Frost and that offense. 8-0 on the year. 18th in the college football playoff rankings right now. Sad. Very sad. Virginia Tech at number 17. They lost to Miami just recently. Looked pretty pathetic in that loss. They're 7-2 now. Mississippi State, they have an intriguing game this coming weekend. They're battling Alabama in Starkville. Mississippi State 7-2 on the year. They're number 16 in the college football playoff rankings. Moving along here, how about Oklahoma State there at number 15, Penn State at 14, Ohio State at 13. It looks like the Big Ten is cannibalizing each other at this juncture, especially in the East. You have Ohio State, you have Penn State, there's Michigan State as well. Boom, boom, boom. And it looks like because of that, they're all two-loss teams. They're going to need a lot of help to get into the college football playoff in my eyes. Some people are still saying there's an argument to be made that Ohio State can actually get into the college football playoff at number 13 and moving all the way up. That would be pretty crazy. It'd be the first two-loss team to ever make it into the playoffs. Of course, the playoffs are pretty young, so really not all that surprising, but people are making the argument that, okay, Ohio State, the brand name, if they can somehow be very convincing the rest of the year, win the Big Ten championship game, crush Wisconsin in the process, then maybe they have an argument if a Miami continues to collapse, or starts to collapse, I should say. And, some other things obviously have to happen for Ohio State to get in. But Penn State essentially done. I mean, they're not making the playoff. Michigan State is an interesting name. Now, they obviously have to impress the committee with the rest of the year and the way in which they finish these games and how they score, but Michigan State at 7-2, I kind of give them a shot as well. It's a long shot, but a shot. And there's USC there at number 11. I don't think they really have a chance to make it into the playoff this year, but there they are. Nice little consolation prize at number 11. Maybe they'll get a New Year's Six bowl. We'll see. Auburn there at number 10, Washington at 9, Wisconsin at 8, Miami at 7. I really want to zone in on Wisconsin because they're at 9-0. And the committee is still not all that impressed at this point. Yes, they have not played many people, but you're 9-0 in your Power 5 conference team. This is somewhat surprising to me. I thought maybe they'd be closer to a 6 or a 7. 8 seems a little too outside of my range. But you know what? There are some really good teams ahead of Wisconsin right now, so it really isn't all that surprising. Obviously, the College Football Playoff Committee operates much differently in their criteria than, say, the AP poll. So, obviously, Wisconsin is a nice little microcosm of that. By the way, Washington at 8-1, they have a big uphill climb. But if they look very impressive going forward, who really knows if some chaos ensues around them with other teams? Maybe an Auburn pulls off the unthinkable and upsets Alabama later this year. Maybe Auburn beats Georgia, too. And then maybe wins the SEC Championship Game. Who the heck knows? Maybe Washington rolls all the way through the season. Maybe the Huskies have a chance to get into the playoff. Then there's Miami, 8-0, number 7. Did not get a lot of respect going into that Virginia Tech game. In fact, I picked Virginia Tech to win that game. And now Miami has a big-time test coming up. So they have a chance to really bolster their resume against Notre Dame in Miami Gardens this week. Then perhaps Clemson in the ACC Championship Game. And I think Miami, if they win, obviously, against Notre Dame, they're going to move up. But if they beat Clemson, Miami will be kicking out Clemson from the playoff picture, I believe, if they beat the Tigers in the ACC Championship Game. That could leave an opportunity for Miami to get in at number 4, or maybe even number 3 if they take down Notre Dame this weekend. And then you see Notre Dame fall. Then you see perhaps TCU move up if they can beat Oklahoma this coming week. There are so many different scenarios here, but I think Miami really sees an opportunity at this point. I think they're relishing the nobody believes in us kind of mentality. And there they are, 8-0, with a big-time rivalry game against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And by the way, this is a big test for Notre Dame, too. Do they belong at number 3? If they win Saturday, obviously it'll be a hard yes. If they lose, then it's going to be a hard no. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, Notre Dame playing on the road in that one. So that's 10 through 7. One more point about these 4 teams. Auburn has a really interesting shot to be that first two-loss team to get into the college football playoff because it's all ahead of them. You look at Alabama, you look at Georgia, you look at perhaps the potentiality of an SEC championship game appearance. If they wipe the floor the rest of the season, and maybe a little chaos ensues ahead of them, maybe an Oklahoma falters, perhaps a Clemson as well to Miami, you could see a scenario where Auburn sneaks in at number 4. I really do believe that. So I think they have a better shot as a two-loss team than obviously Ohio State. Throw the brand name thing out of the window, please, because Auburn has the opportunity to really bolster their resume with the upcoming opponents that they have. So Auburn, big-time chance for them to get in. So that's 10 through 7. We do have a reaction poll before we get into 6 through 1 here. We want to know your thoughts, folks. Which college football team should be at number 4? Should it be a Clemson, an Oklahoma, a TCU, heck, even Miami? That's not even inside the top 6 right now. So throw a laughing face for the Tigers, a heart for the Sooners, all those Boomer Sooner fans out there, throw out your hearts, an angry face for TCU, all those Horned Frog fans, and a sad face for the University of Miami because I am crying because I think Miami should be a little higher than they are right now. So throw in those reactions, folks. We'll be tracking them. I know there's a big-time college football contingent in the Cam Rogers Show audience, and so I'm seeing some hearts out there for Oklahoma. The Sooners fans are always the greatest. There's always so much more passion for the Sooners fans than any other team, I feel, the way in which I am following the audiences here on the shows and the Facebook pages by Chat Sports. So throw in those reactions, throw in those comments as well. We'll be showing them up there. Maybe there should be another team that isn't within those options that should be inside that top 4 right now. Perhaps a Big Ten team? Joel is saying no love for the Big Ten. Well, Joel, the problem is they're all beating up on each other. That's the issue. So when Michigan State and Penn State and Ohio State are all beating up on each other in the East, well, then it's tough. Maybe you're perhaps alluding to the whole Wisconsin situation. Then yes, I will agree with you on that. I think there is a little lack of disrespect for the Wisconsin Badgers right now. Joel, you're going to have to wait until the Big Ten championship game. And if Wisconsin can really decisively have a victory in that one, beat down on a Michigan State or Ohio State, then perhaps you're looking at Wisconsin team inside that playoff picture. But we'll have to wait until then. So I guess the disrespect and the lack of love, if you will continue. All right, here we go. The top 6, in case you missed it last night. There's Georgia at number 1, 9-0 on the year. They'll be battling Clemson, 8-1 if the season ended today, of course. Alabama at number 2, and Notre Dame at number 3, rounding out on the outside looking in here. Oklahoma 8-1 on the campaign, and TCU at 8-1. Some big-time impact games this week that we'll get to very soon. But looking at the overall playoff picture here, I think Clemson has emerged in really good shape. Its win at Virginia Tech doesn't look quite as splashy per se as it once did, but a week 2 win over Auburn that now sits at a pretty good spot helps Clemson's case to remain in the top 4. And you would think that the Tigers have all of a sudden become fans of Gus Malzahn's Tigers. Why is that? Well, if the Tigers continue to win, that makes Clemson's victory over Auburn look even better. And Auburn, of course, will be battling Georgia and Alabama coming up pretty darn soon. And then perhaps the Georgia in the SEC Championship game. All of a sudden, Clemson's resume looks all that much better because Auburn has won the SEC and they've looked like the dominant team. Of course, this is all hypothetical. We're all thinking about the future right now. But Clemson, I think, an opportunity there. Michigan State, by the way, I didn't mention this. They moved up 12 spots. Every other team really didn't move a lot. There wasn't too much traction in terms of going up and going down in terms of the college football playoff rankings this past week, but Michigan State, the biggest mover, most notably. All right, let's get to these impact games here. A lot of good ones this coming Saturday. Speaking of Michigan State, they're taking on Ohio State at Columbus, and I think this is really, this is the last chance for Ohio State. I mean, this is it. This is like, they're on life support right now. And if they lose this game, it's over. So if they beat a Michigan State, perhaps get their way into the Big Ten championship game, and convincingly beat a Wisconsin, then Ohio State has made a somewhat of an argument in terms of getting into the college football playoff. Georgia, number 1, taking on Auburn. This one in Auburn, and I think that this is going to be obviously a fun game. Jake Fromm and Nick Chubb versus Stidham there. I really don't know what to expect out of this one. I think Georgia needs to be careful here. I think they need to be wary of the whole complacency factor, where perhaps it was a bit of a surprise internally for the players to see them at number 1. How do they handle that ranking going forward? Because you got Alabama creeping up right behind them. And they understand if they lose to an Auburn team, it's very possible they see them again in the SEC Championship Game. And they don't want that. So I think Georgia needs to be really careful on the road. Speaking of Alabama, they're battling Mississippi State. Very fun game coming up at that. Alabama and Mississippi State have had some pretty competitive games in years past, some fun ones. And so we'll see what happens. I remember the Dak Prescott game, most notably, between Mississippi State and Alabama. So fun one at that. We'll see what happens with these two. Alabama at number 2, obviously with a little bit of a fire under their butts because they're not at number 1. And it's bulletin board material for Nick Saban and company within Tuscaloosa to say, hey, there's no respect from the committee right now for us. And I guarantee this, Nick Saban hasn't really had the opportunity to say that all that much. In fact, he's been saying the opposite recently. The rat poison comments, the media hype all over Alabama. Well, you know what, Nick? You got your wish. Now you can kind of change that narrative and go with the whole why not us mentality, I guess, which is kind of weird to say because it's Alabama and it's football. But still, at number 2, that's kind of an upset for them. So they battle Mississippi State in Starkville. Notre Dame battling Miami, the number 7 team in the nation. This is going to be a fun one. This is a rivalry that, of course, dates back many years. And I think, this is not the Miami-Notre Dame rivalry of the Ed Reeds of the world and the Michael Irvins, but I digress. It will be a good game. It's going to be a measuring stick game for both these teams. Notre Dame, do they belong at number 3? Miami, are they building up momentum to perhaps upset a Clemson in the ACC Championship Game and get into the playoff? I'll tell you one thing. The ratings would go nuts if Notre Dame and Miami are both in the playoffs. Just saying. Finally, TCU at Oklahoma. This one in Norman. Baker Mayfield and his Heisman campaign continues. And Oklahoma has a chance for at least 2 more top 15 wins here against TCU and then again in the Big 12 Championship. A home game against West Virginia as well. And West Virginia could crack the top 25 if they take down Kansas State this week. So that's only going to help the Sooners here. So Oklahoma, obviously, they see a great opportunity ahead of them. They're playing at home against Kenny Hill and company in TCU. This is going to be a fun game. There's going to be a lot of points because it's the Big 12, of course. Can Baker Mayfield continue that momentum that he had from that Bedlam game against Oklahoma State? TCU probably is going to have a different game plan on the defensive side than what Oklahoma State had. In fact, I can kind of guarantee it because when you look at the tape and the way in which Oklahoma ran over Oklahoma State's defense, you got to make adjustments if you're that next team, obviously TCU being that team. Dylan is chiming in. Who's your pick for OU versus TCU? It looks like you're wearing purple, Dylan. So I'm going to assume you're a Horned Frog fan. I'm sorry. I'm going with the Sooners in this one. I think Baker Mayfield is going to be a tough man to stop at home. He wants the fans coming out in rabid fashion. He said it earlier this week. I think that's going to happen. I think on the road for the Horned Frogs, it's going to be very tough for them. But if TCU somehow wins this game, you got to watch out for this squad as well to get into the college football playoff. And then you have to start thinking about, is Oklahoma done, right? You got to think this is essentially an elimination game in many sense. So going OU, Dylan. I'm sorry, my friend, assuming that you're a Horned Frog fan. But it's going to be a fun game, so you'll enjoy it. Maybe just not the end when they lose. Sorry about that. So big-time games across college football coming up this Saturday. Very excited. And, of course, stay right here on Chat Sports. We'll be keeping you updated with all the highlights on social media, etc. So it's going to be a wild one, a lot of upsets. And next Tuesday, 7 o'clock Eastern time, we will reveal the latest batch of rankings. So bookmark in your calendar, if you will. All right, let's transition now into what's going to be a big-time story tomorrow surrounding Ezekiel Elliott and the court's decision. So there will be a decision tomorrow, most likely. Hearings will go on with a 3-judge panel in terms of should Ezekiel Elliott be granted an injunction, essentially. while the court goes through its process in the Second Circuit. This is the same circuit that struck down on Tom Brady and that eventually led to Tom Brady being suspended for 4 games. So the odds are stacked against Zeke in the NFLPA at this point. I mean, we knew this from the beginning in the fact that they moved this case from Texas to New York. But I'm giving you all what to expect. And so this is obviously a developing story. It's been developing for some time. The news is probably going to break tomorrow, afternoon time. And this week's developments really and truly could be the end of the line. Legal experts saying that's because there are few options left for either side as far as Elliott's 2017 status goes. So the loser of Thursday's hearing could request a hearing in full from the Second Circuit Court. Those are rarely granted. And if you haven't heard the phrase before, it's called an en banc hearing, which essentially means that if the losing party doesn't feel they had a fair decision from a 3-judge panel, they can ask for a rehearing and have a full panel of judges rule on the said case. That's what happened recently with Ezekiel Elliott losing down south and asked for the en banc hearing. I think it's Latin, maybe it's Greek. All those Latin and Greek aficionados out there in the comment section, let me know. But that's one option. The problem is it doesn't happen a lot. And so if we were talking about in the present right now, for fantasy purposes and for Cowboys fans in general and game planning, Ezekiel Elliott is good to play because technically that stay is still going on. Of course, that was granted last Friday. That allowed him to play most recently against Kansas City. So as we stand right now, that stay is still in effect, but it doesn't really matter because the hearings are tomorrow. And we're going to get some breaking news about whatever the heck the decision is. And stay on Chat Sports, of course, for the latest breaking developments regarding that. But for Cowboys fans, for fantasy circles out there, it's going down tomorrow, and it could very well be the end of the road here. It has been a long and tireless saga. Both sides have heard enough about it, I feel. Let me know, actually, in the comments section if anybody actually enjoys talking about legal stuff because it makes my brain turn into mush. So we do have a weigh-in, though, and we want you commenting and throwing in your thoughts about this. So we probably will have a decision tomorrow. And so with that, will Zeke win his case versus the NFL tomorrow? Is it over tomorrow in favor of Ezekiel Elliott and the Dallas Cowboys? Because this is very important. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys can win games consistently without Zeke. It was on display again against the Kansas City Chiefs. We had some of the highlights up for you earlier. We'll probably throw them up again. And so when you take that important piece out of the puzzle on the offensive side, now you're looking at Darren McFadden, Alfred Morris, maybe a Rod Smith in third down situations and passing situations. It changes things. It changes the offensive game plan. And I think that if Zeke loses tomorrow, I don't think the Cowboys can make the playoffs. They looked great against Kansas City, but a big reason why was because of Ezekiel Elliott. Elliott, of course, creates that play action. I don't think Dak Prescott is a 45 throwing kind of quarterback, if you will, when it all is on him. He's not a Matt Stafford. He's not a Russell Wilson. He's not a Tom Brady, obviously. Those are the guys who can kind of get away with throwing 40 to 45 times and maybe come back in the fourth quarter. That's not a Dak Prescott type of deal. That's not Dallas's offensive identity. And so if they have to change their identity because Ezekiel Elliott is missing 6 games, that's a problem. And you see it kind of a little bit with the Carolina Panthers and how they seem to be struggling on the offensive side. Their defense has been winning them games recently. And so I think that could be a similar situation with the Dallas Cowboys. So will Zeke win or will the NFL win? I'm seeing some comments right now. He will get 4 games. That's Joel chiming in. So it's an interesting situation, and it's a developing story, and it looks like it could finally come to an end tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon when the hearing goes on. And so, obviously, this being in the NFL's backyard, I feel, if I had to predict, the NFL is probably going to win this. At the grand scheme of things, you have to go back to the collective bargaining agreement. The CBA says that Roger Goodell can essentially give any suspension that he wants, and if you don't like it, well, that's tough. And I brought up an analogy with our own Tom Downey recently on the Cam Rogers show. I believe it was on Monday. You remember when your parents would be like, life's not fair because I told you so? That's kind of what Roger Goodell is doing to Ezekiel Elliott. Whether I feel he gave Elliott a fair process in terms of his appeal, etc., it's not for me to say. What I'm saying is Roger Goodell is essentially saying, I have the power to do this. We've had PR nightmares in the past in terms of suspensions with domestic violence. And I'm going to nail down this 6-game suspension because I said so and because you signed for it, or the NFLPA signed for it in the collective bargaining agreement. That is where we are at right now. So it's not about whether it's fair or not, although that's what Ezekiel Elliott and the NFLPA are arguing, that essentially he didn't receive a fair appeal. The NFL, of course, countering that, saying it did everything required in the collective bargaining agreement to make it happen. But the courts in the past, most notably with Deflategate, have said essentially and emphasized the court's limited authority to intervene in arbitration matters like Elliott's when his suspension was upheld through the NFL appeal system. So what that means is, look, the courts are going to be like, we really have no jurisdiction in all of this. You signed the collective bargaining agreement. You knew that this stuff could perhaps happen, and you signed anyway. We're not going to reverse a decision because you agreed to something and now you don't like it after the fact, like hindsight bias kind of thing. So that's what I feel is going to happen from the courts. That's how I see it all playing out. That's probably going to be the argument when the decision is ruled, the court's ruling in favor of the NFL. It's going to be the same, probably exact argument as what was essentially put out for the NFL against Tom Brady in Deflategate. So obviously these are two different infractions. One is an accusation of domestic violence. Another is an accusation of deflating footballs. But they both fall under the CBA and all that stuff. So with that, a decision is looming, folks. Stay tuned tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, of course, the decision will come down among a 3-judge panel whether or not Ezekiel Elliott will be granted that injunction. And if he is, by the way, he's probably good to play the rest of the year because this whole court process is going to take all the way into the offseason. So it could be a big victory for Cowboys fans, could be a big loss for Cowboys fans tomorrow. Honestly, tomorrow, I mean, it comes down to the playoffs. If Zeke wins that injunction, I think the Cowboys go to the playoffs. If Zeke does not win that injunction, I think they don't make it. So it really comes down to all of that. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, some developing story news, if you will, with Ezekiel Elliott. Stay tuned for the breaking news coming tomorrow, but that's what you should expect. All right, to wrap up, we have a little final word here on really what is a tragic story. Roy Halladay passed away yesterday in a plane crash, and it was one of those situations where I get the update on my phone, and you almost have to do a double take because you don't really believe it. Roy Halladay, one of the great pitchers in MLB history, 8-time All-Star, Cy Young Award winner, pitched a perfect game, also pitched a no-hitter in the postseason. He was one of the great starting pitchers in MLB history. And in an era of the MLB now where it seems as though there's a lot more emphasis on bullpens and we don't see as much 8-inning kind of performances from our starting pitching staffs these days, Roy Halladay was the exact opposite of that. He was a guy, he was a workhorse who could go into a game, give you 7-8 innings consistently. And hearing this story about the plane crash, I guess the whole situation is that there was no distress call, etc. Who really knows what the whole details of it? Of course, it's an ongoing investigation, what have you. But Roy Halladay, obviously gone way too young, born in 1977, as you see there, and just passing away yesterday in 2017. And, of course, on behalf of everybody here at Chat Sports, sending out our heartfelt condolences to the Blue Jays community, the Phillies community, the MLB community, the world in general, obviously mourning a loss of one of the premier pitchers in Major League Baseball. I remember playing him in my video games and, using him, in statistical research, seeing his stats and kind of comparing him to many of the other pitchers of his time and seeing how dominant he really was. So obviously a guy that we'll be missing, and hopefully the Halladay family is doing the best that they possibly can right now. So Roy Halladay, thank you so much for what was truly greatness on the mound, and we will miss you going forward. So that's the final word here on the Cam Rogers Show. Hope you guys have a great Wednesday out there. I will see you Friday morning. Some fun guests on tap. Chantel McCabe of the Golf Channel coming on, and Charkandrick West of the Kansas City Chiefs. So a fun program on your Friday. Stay tuned for that. By the way, get the podcast version of the Cam Rogers Show. Just search, very simple, the Cam Rogers Show. Until Friday, have a great rest of your week, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you